Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by King of Burbank, Michael Fairbanks, for a very special episode as we recap everything we saw at AFI Fest 2025, Los Angeles' biggest annual film festival. We both attended the festival and saw about 20 features each, including some obscure titles, some international releases, and some big studio premieres. This was a super fun time, a super fun chance to hang out, see some great cinema, and today we're going to go through everything we saw with little brief reviews and little brief conversations on each of the films. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Now let's get to our AFI Fest 2025 special episode. Okay, Michael, it is so good to see you here on the call today, which is kind of weird because I'm so used to seeing you in person now, because we did attend AFI Fest together, 2025, a couple of buddies at the Chinese Theater. It was a great festival. Before we get into the films, because today's our special episode where we're going to talk about everything we saw. To be clear for those at home, a little bit of a briefer review, not just because we have like 30 films to get through, but also some of these will have their own episode eventually. So like if you really want to know our in-depth thoughts on like, is this thing on? Save it for the episode. We'll get there, I promise. But Michael, before we get into these films that we saw, and we'll go day by day in the festival, I think that's an easy way to chunk it out. I'm just curious because I believe this is one of the first festivals, at least in a while, that you've attended as press. What was your experience like at AFI Fest? Did you enjoy AFI Fest? How did that week go for you?
The last major festival work that I did was at Sundance in 2017. So it has definitely been a hot minute, but I really enjoyed it. It was great to be in Hollywood. There were so many different moments where I really felt like this is my calling to do this and to be around this part of the industry. I think that really struck me during the red carpet premiere of Jay Kelly that I got into from the Rush line, which I'm sure we'll talk about that experience. But I just really felt like I'm where I'm supposed to be, and it was exhausting. It was very. The good news about the location is that there's not a lot of like transport from place to place. You just kind of go from theater to theater, but the downside of that is that you're in one place going from theater to theater and you don't really get a sense of community or really like get to chat with people unless you're going to the lounge for 40 minutes to write. But I found that, usually we weren't even really doing that. So I had a great time. I would love to go again. It was a wonderful week, and even at its lowest of the lows, I was very happy to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I love AFI Fest. I think covering film festivals in general. AFI Fest, as you mentioned, super, super convenient. Enjoyed hanging out with you a bunch there. But yeah, I mean, we definitely grinded also. We were like nonstop watching films. It definitely comes at a cost where you sit there, and I forget what film it was, but on like day 4, I was just in the middle of a screening, and this does not reflect the quality of the film, but I literally was like, I'm in purgatory. I spend every day, all day. I wake up and I come here at 10:30 a.m. and then I'm here until like 11:30 p.m. and I am just in the same theaters. We also only saw films in 2 theaters. Actually, we had the one for the red carpet, and I guess you got 2 in there. But unlike, I guess for those who have never been to the Chinese theater and the inside of it, so there's the giant, beautiful, famous Chinese theater, and that's where the red carpets are held. The rest is in the theater like behind it. And there is 2 theaters, or at least 2 theaters on the bottom floor. And then there's like a row on the top, and those are all really small. And the festival holds screenings in all of them. But for some reason, we only got Theater 1 and Theater 6. So literally, we were there every day, all day, watching 8 hours of films, let's say, in these 2 theaters. So it does feel a little bit like purgatory at a certain point. But I thought the lineup was great here. I thought it was probably the best experience I've had at a film festival in person at AFI Fest. As far as just like everything went smooth. We had no issues getting tickets, no issues getting in anywhere. We kept to our schedule. I think we're very strategic with getting food, with enjoying the lounge. Shout out AFI Fest also for having free water and free coffee and everything. So that definitely helps. But I had a really great time. I thought the lineup, AFI Fest really went through this period where it was really, really big and strong in the mid 2010s. And then COVID hit. really dipped. Not to hate on my favorite festival, got really rough with certain places, and then it's slowly every year rebuilt and rebuilt, and we've been rebuilding, and we'll get to rebuilding in a minute. But I think this was the first year where it was really like, oh, we are so back. And it was a great experience. I'm so mad that, or sad rather, that I think next year you're not going to be able to attend. We'll see how everything goes. Too early to predict, but I definitely had a great time. And, you know, it's one of those where it's like I sit there in the final line or in the final screening, or I'm leaving the theater for the last time. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be back in a year, because every year you can go. So I really enjoy AFI Fest every year. But let's get to why we went to LA, why we spent so much time in this theater, this screening. So we'll go day by day. I think that's the best way to chunk it out. Just talk about what we saw each day. Some things we both saw, some things only one of us saw. But let's get to day one. And Michael, I will let you take it away. What did you see? What was your opening film of the festival?
My opening film was The Stranger, which is a literary adaptation about a man whose mom dies, and he goes to the funeral, but everyone at the funeral notices that he's not particularly emotional about it. And he goes around town and he comes back to his home and he meets a woman who he knew at a certain point in time, and they start dating, but he doesn't feel much for her. And he has a neighbor who hates the Muslim people who are in his life, and he vents to him about that, and the guy doesn't feel much about that. And it's sort of a long string of white apathy, very European, perfect way to start off this festival and set the tone. I did enjoy it. I remember reading this book in college and getting absolutely nothing out of it. In fact, I'm pretty sure a friend of mine took our copies of this book and burned them at a local park, if this is the book I remember correctly. But now that I've, grown and matured and aged, I certainly got a decent amount out of the story, and it's beautifully directed in black and white. It's very sumptuous. It really sells that it is this lofty classic. I'm not sure if the material was really there for me. I got a little apathied out after a while. This guy just starts getting progressively angrier about how much he doesn't care about anything, and it gets to a point. But definitely a well-made movie that set the tone for the week.
I can jump in because I saw this the next day at like 8 p.m. with friend of the podcast, Paul Price, the one appearance he made at AFI Fest this year. And I should be clear that expectation wise, number one, I had a very long day. So walking in, you have a very long day. What a movie to pick just to like sit there and, enjoy. But it was also, the expectation was somehow it formed that we thought this movie was gay, which there's like a shadow of queerness. It's not like it's an anti-queer film. But we were told that from you, and also I'll say in your defense, Paul Price, longtime friends of the podcast know, has the weirdest and most difficult taste to nail down out of anyone I've ever met. So you never really know. That's why I stopped recommending him films, because I'm like, I just have no idea what you're going to like or not. But you were like, I think Paul's going to love this. We were told somehow the image formed that it was gay. And then it was also when we got there, the woman at the ticket desk we were talking to, and she was like, oh, you're going to go see The Stranger, the horror movie. So we were like, wow, we're going to go into a gay horror movie that Paul loves. And certainly none of those three things turned out to be true. Really, I thought the film was fine. Like, it looks absolutely gorgeous, absolutely brilliant looking with the black and white cinematography, the use of lighting. I think the technicals here really shine. It's interesting because the film, and I'd love to see, I've not seen the other adaptations of the story, but it really tries to flesh itself out in two different ways. It has that shadow of queerness, which I think is effective enough. Before this moment of violence, this guy who, as you mentioned, is just pure apathy. The camera focuses very longingly on the flesh of someone. And that triggers possibly something within him, this burst of violence. That was an interesting angle. Again, it's there for literally a second and it's never mentioned again, but I thought that was worthwhile. And then it also fleshes out the fact, as you mentioned, that in this city, the Arab community is segregated. They are attacked. They are being pushed out by the French. And they really give some really haunting lines to specifically the woman of or the sister of the guy who gets killed. And she has a scene where she's like, you guys just kill us all the time. Like, you know, this doesn't matter. You know, there's no justice in this. And I think that was a really poignant, beautiful, tragic expression to give. I think the biggest issue is when you try to elevate the material, but the rest of the film, you are so dedicated to being exactly what the book is. You're using the exact same lines, the exact same narrative beats. The issue is that it doesn't necessarily support, the foundation does not support the evolution you're providing in other ways. To have that scene with a sister, and then we won't get into spoilers, but to have the ending of the film be what it is, and the projection of how justice works then in this world, those are two conflicting ideas that I don't think really go together that well, and actually invalidates a lot of what this film was building as far as that angle. It's definitely not terrible or anything. I would just say out of everything at the festival, this is probably one I'm more middle of the road. It's kind of it's there. For me, I would not necessarily say run to the theater to see this, but I definitely wasn't hating it while watching it. For anyone curious, I don't think it's much of a shock that Paul hated this. Paul was like, oh my God, I would give it lower than a half a star if I could, which was very funny. But yeah, not quite for me, but I see what it was going for, and I do like the director overall, so always worthwhile to see a new Ozen film. I will quickly just go through some that I saw this day that you did not. 1001 Frames, this Iranian film, which all takes place in the POV of a camera during a audition with multiple women. And it starts really simple. This famous director, or this well-known director rather, is creating or casting this role for 1001 Nights. And or I hope that's the title. Anyway, for a play or for a movie, and it starts to get darker and darker and darker. And I really like this film because it really pushes the line between like reality and fiction. Not only are you just witnessing this really uncomfortable situation brew, and as these women, these incredible women, give these incredible performances, you just sit there and have to reckon with like, oh, this has happened to so many women, and it gets so dark and it gets so uncomfortable. But then the ending takes a huge swing, and like, what is this movie? What is the identity of this movie? In a way that like though completely lands and works. I know like no one saw this. It was like a tiny little discovery film at AFI Fest, but it genuinely blew me away. The Eyes of Ghana, very, very engaging documentary looking at the history of Ghana in cinema, and specifically this one director who captured these really, really historical events in the birth and in the development of this nation, and then thought he lost all the footage. But now in London, it turns out they saved the negatives for like thousands of hours of his films. So it's that process of him getting it back while also trying to discuss the power of cinema as a tool of rebellion and revolution. Very, very dynamic documentary. You never know what you're going to get with the documentary. It's such a mixed bag to go see them at the theater because like it could be the most boring shit in the world. No, this was very dynamic and engaging. We Believe You, very short, like an hour long, about a mother who is sitting there at a court hearing getting custody of the kids or trying to protect her custody of the kids against a father who has an abusive history. Amazing performance. I don't know if it necessarily grabbed me in this way I wanted it to. It is like an hour long. It's like a 50-minute unbroken scene of them sitting there talking and debating who should have the kids. And it really makes its point like right away. And then you just keep waiting for something to happen. I think specifically the father in this, his court or his like argument for why he should have the kids is so bad that his own lawyer like is like laughing at him and is like, this guy is horrible, this guy should not have his kids. So you're sitting there like waiting for just like everyone to get done talking because you know he's not going to get custody because it's an awful situation, it's an awful argument. So I found that to be frustrating. And then finally, one of my favorites of the festival was for like a week my favorite film of the year, All That's Left of You. Palestinian drama that takes you through generations of a Palestine family to explain why in the current moment the situation is so complex and so emotional and so charged, because you can't look at this conflict between Israel and Palestine and just see what happened from 2019 to now or 2020 to now or even these last few years. It goes back generations. Heartbreaking, so well crafted. It is longer, it's almost 3 hours, but it never feels boring because it just is so clear. The vision of this director and this filmmaker is so clear and it's so well realized. really, really just like poignant, powerful stuff. And it doesn't just start and end with like, oh, there's a lot of death, which is there. You get some tragic deaths. One of the few films this year that made me like tear up actually with one of the deaths. But it really puts the audience in the shoes of these just impossible, unspeakable horrors and challenges of humanity. While also then maintaining like the power of humanity and the power of how you respond to these horrors. It was just really, really touching, emotional stuff. And it's not, and we'll talk about another Palestinian film here later on. I think this festival was a great example of films that were really important, but also really, really, really well made and really, really well crafted. Which I think when you get the both sides there, you just create for me cinematic brilliance. But the final film, oh no, there's actually two more. Sorry, why don't you take away the next film that you talked about or you saw on this day?
So after The Stranger, I saw Jim Jarmusch's Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, which is a fuddy-duddy family dramedy of sorts that comprises three short stories that all sort of take place after fraught family moments have occurred. You have a first short, which is Adam Driver, Malin Balick, and Tom Waits. Tom Waits is a very codependent dad. He's always breaking stuff around the house, and Adam and Malin visit him, and they hang out for a bit. And then you've got Kate Blanchett, Vicky Krieps, and Charlotte Gainsbourg. Is that right? Who have a tea party. Um, Vicky Krieps is gay. Uh, Kate Blanchett is the person who keeps the peace in the house, and their mom is weird and mean. In the third segment, you've got a brother and sister who lost their parents some time ago, and they are played by. Um,
Oh my god, the one just got Gotham nominated. Come on,
I
man.
know, I know, I know. I'm making sure I have the right names. India Moore and Lucas Sabet, and we will kind of watch them have a nice afternoon lunch, and they reflect on the loss of their parents. I just found this movie to be pretty listless. It's kind of a glorified tea party. Didn't find it all that funny. And I just sort of felt like we missed all of the really engaging drama, and Jarmusch just kind of wants us to stew in this awkwardness and this irritability, and I just wasn't really on board for it. It has some great jokes, it has some solid moments, and of course all the actors are great, although I will say the brother and sister were really giving more flirtatious couple energy, which made me a bit uncomfortable, especially considering that the third segment is easily the worst of the three. And I also just don't think that Jim Jarmusch is very comfortable writing black characters. There's a part where the guy quotes Groucho Marx, which I just don't think a 2025 black guy is doing. Call me crazy. Very, like I said, fuddy duddy movie, but cute for what it is, I suppose.
See, I went in, I told you directly, I was like, I know I'm going to give this 1 star. I'm fully ready to hate this. All the elements are there based off what I heard that it was going to be terrible. And I fucking love this movie. I like really was surprised by how much I enjoyed this. Number one, very entertaining. Entire theater howling at the screen at moments, especially the first segment with Tom Waits and Adam Driver. They have like such a good chemistry where it was like, oh, we need to see this pairing again. But what forms is not only do I just like let the rich white people talk around a lunch. Like the tea party, I was like, I love this. I could just live in this world with these characters. But what you build throughout all these is you have a lot of the same elements. You have a lot of the same ingredients, even to the point where they will have little things like skateboarders in each one. A Rolex watch appears multiple times. But you change these dynamics from across the world, where you change the history of each one of these families. And I think by repeating the same experiment 3 times, each with different ingredients, I think you get actually like a quite poignant look at family, at dysfunctional family. And then at the end, in the third one, obviously we switch tone a lot to where their parents have died tragically. And this is a brother and sister coming together back to their parents' house in this moment of longing and needing healing and reminiscing about the family. And you get like this, I think, this really beautiful little text where it's like, yes, family is dysfunctional and annoying, and oftentimes when you hang out with them, you want to immediately leave. You are looking at your watch and you're like, Dad, I think I gotta go. Like, I can't talk anymore. Um, Yet when they're gone, I think it just builds a really beautiful little text on like, yes, it's annoying, but that is also such a big force in life and such a big support and such a big root. There's a lot of emotion when they leave. The film tragically has no idea how to end. It keeps going when it doesn't need to. Again, makes its point, and that last segment could have been cut in half, and it could have been reworked, definitely to be more effective. But I not only found this really, really entertaining, but I found this to be really quite moving by the end. I was really surprised. I definitely don't know, I wouldn't probably have given this the Golden Lion, but I certainly thought this was much more crowd friendly, much more pleasing than I ever would have expected.
I just think I find Jarmusch's cadence to be a bit off-putting. I've certainly liked a couple of his movies, Patterson, Ghost Dog, even The Dead Don't Die I enjoyed. But in this more gritty scenario, I just think it's too cute. And while I think those themes are there, you have to dig under a lot of artifice and a lot of fakey screenwritery barriers that just don't really land for me. It's not really, to me, an emotional story beyond what is there in the text, because the execution is so droll and stoic by design.
Sure, I must say, I would not be right to not warn everyone. If you see this, especially in a theater, maybe some of the worst car driving effects I've ever seen in my life, to the point where I was like, oh no, is this what this entire movie is going to be? It features genuinely one of the worst green screen jobs in editing people in a moving car. It looks so fictional. It took me out of it continually with that first one, especially. And I was like, oh, maybe that's like somehow a style we are going for. But no, that quickly, like, clearly they try their best in certain scenes towards the end to make it look really good when they drive. So I was like, I must warn the audience. It is one of the most visually rough looking movies in the beginning that I've seen all year. It was embarrassing. But outside of that, we had different opinions. Final movie you saw on Wednesday. I also saw recently, not as part of the festival, but I will quickly start with Rebuilding, starring Josh O'Connor. I was so excited for this. This from Sundance. If I had to pick one film from Sundance that I wanted to watch, it was definitely this, about this farmer who cares for his daughter after their entire farm and house and community burned down in a fire. And it talks about them rebuilding their lives, rebuilding their sense of identity. Not only am I just continually on like the biggest Josh O'Connor kick in the world, I just think he's turning in phenomenal work. I mean, this year alone, between this, The Mastermind, which I know you didn't love, but I think you would even agree Josh O'Connor is the saving grace of that film. And then apparently he's incredible in the new Knives Out. I mean, this is like a generational run when you factor in Challengers, La Chimera, like this guy is just continually producing some of the best work of the year, and he continues to do that here. A very longing feature, a very thoughtful feature, not just about building a house and building back this stability for his daughter, but also really him questioning his identity, because that's been raw from him. He only knows himself. He only internalizes himself as this cowboy, as this farmer. That was his soul, which also reflects in a conversation on a changing American soul. But that's been robbed from him. There's a point where someone asks him, like, can you even be a cowboy if you don't own any cows? And he just kind of has to sit there with that. And I found that to be a really, really poignant experience. I was really moved by this. What did you think of it, Michael?
I loved it. For the longest time, it was my favorite movie at the festival. The first thing I want to say about it is that because it's just shot in these natural Colorado locations, it looks like it cost $150 million. It's really incredible. And I think we'll come back to this with Train Dreams later in the show. just how much mileage you can get out of just going to the middle of nowhere and finding a story that you can tell. Because even though this is a very intimate story, the scale of it feels massive. I was also just so impressed with how tender and sweet this is, and how it doesn't go out of its way to manufacture conflict or drama, but it's also not saccharine. And I think the best way to explain that is that Josh O'Connor's ex-wife, Megan Fahey, is married to another guy who is co-parenting their daughter as well. And usually in one of these movies, Josh and that guy would have like some beef for some stupid reason. They'd be at each other's throats, fighting, and it would just be a whole unnecessary subplot. Totally not the case here. They're very friendly with one another, but it's also not the two of them are best friends and they're really buddy dads. It's this very realistic, I'm not your buddy, but you're around and you're helping with my daughter, and I appreciate that. And all the dynamics in the movie really reflect that, where you have the community who's living in the FEMA camp at the trailer park that Josh lives at. Very super lived in dynamics between all of them. And they have a great conversation at the dinner table at one point about mourning the things both that they lost and the things that they don't even remember that they've lost. And it just never dips into being cheesy, even when it kind of the text becomes very it starts telling you exactly what the themes are, but it somehow is never in your face. I also have to mention Lily Latore as the daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous child performance in a movie where a child that was too precocious or irritating could have sank the whole thing, because this whole thing is a daddy daughter story of this guy trying to redeem this relationship before he potentially leaves. And it is just an incredible dynamic between the two of them. And I also have to mention Amy Madigan, who many of us were introduced to recently as Aunt Gladys in Weapons, giving a much more subtle performance as Megan Fahey's mother, who imparts us with some wisdom as well. She is fabulous as well. To me, it felt like a Chloe Zhao movie. It
Mm.
really had the energy of The Rider, but I liked it a lot better than what she's done in these deconstructed Western settings. I absolutely loved it. I really think it's one of the absolute best of the year.
I love to hear it. I'm curious from you though, because you saw it obviously at the screening in LA. Obviously, Hollywood and Burbank survived, right? But there was these massive fires earlier this year that really was like just trauma on like the level of a city that I think we rarely see. Did you notice like a lot of from the crowd around you like heightened emotions maybe because of that, or was it just another screening?
I wish I could give you a pandery answer, but the truth is, it was just
Okay.
another screening. It was 10 o'clock. Like everyone was ready to hit the last movie and go to bed. It was cozy, and I think the emotions of the movie definitely hit. But I don't think there was any extra reverence. I didn't stay for the Q&A though. So
Okay.
it might have popped up at that point, but I had to go home and feed the cats. So I missed that, sadly. I would have loved to stay because I would have loved to hear the
Right.
director talk about it.
I wish they did that Q&A. It would be helpful if they did it before the movie, before you guys left or late at night. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that conversation. Let's move on to our next day because we are going to Thursday now, day 2 of the festival. And Michael, this is all you. The 3 films, I only screened The Stranger and stuff that we'll talk about elsewhere. You saw 3 movies that I did not see all festival long, and I think you have a good story to go along with one of them. So take it away.
So this was quite a day and sort of my breaking point. All too early, but we redeemed it. We started off with Two Prosecutors, which is a story that takes place in 1937 during Stalin's Great Terror. And we have a young lawyer visiting a prison to find a specific guy with key information about what's going on with these various governments. I am not a history person. I will fully put that out on the table. So to me, this was a real education about the period, and I truly appreciate that. And I think it's very important to carry these stories forward and bring them to life for new people like me to learn about. That being said, as a movie, nothing too special. I think that the director, Sergei Lasanita, has a very deliberate, slow style that in some ways is very effective. He establishes this really icy, cut off prison, but a lot of that comes with multiple minute takes of the prison yard sitting in silence or our lawyer walking up the stairs slowly and waiting in the waiting room. It's a lot of stuff about the administrative layers of fascism, which eventually transfers over when he travels back and has to meet with another higher up prosecutor to get approval to investigate these situations more, and he has to go through another really long administrative process. And then the ending, it has a powerful, sad ending, but it also is pretty abrupt and somewhat predictable. Not bad, but just kind of there. Now, speaking of bad, the next movie I hit that damn near killed me is Continental 25, directed by Radu Jude, who I have not seen a single movie from. He directed Do Not Expect Much from the End of the World, Bad Luck, Banging, or Looney Porn, Dracula, and I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians, okay?
I saw that one at
And
AFI Fest at 10 p.m. Rough experience, but continue.
before the movie, the moderator goes, "Is everybody a Radu Jude fan?" And the audience goes, "Yeah!" Right? So I really thought I was in for it. Something great here. But instead, the story starts with an unhoused man wandering around in a park. He pees on stuff. He goes on stage and solicits money. He's kind of causing chaos, and that little bit of it is fun. And he's squatting in somebody's basement, and the building is being repurposed into a hotel or an apartment building or something. And the woman who has to evict him ends up having a moral crisis because the unhoused guy, ends up hanging himself instead of leaving. So, for the rest of the film, this woman embarks on the most insufferable speaking tour about how she feels so guilty about this and what do you think about it? And she talks to her friend who's like, I don't really care about homeless people either, but I try. And she goes out on a date with a bike messenger that seemingly goes on for about 8 hours. She also talks to a preacher and a couple of other people. It is truly one of the most irritating things I've ever sat through. I don't understand why we thought this guilty landlord trip was worth making a movie about, but I assure you that it confirmed that I absolutely will not touch a single fucking thing this man makes from here on out. Truly one of the worst movies I've ever watched. So after that, I had Sound of Falling booked. But although I am very much looking forward to seeing Sound of Falling, I said, okay, I've seen two European slow subtitled movies, and I'm feeling very early in the festival a little burnt out on this experience, and I need to change the pattern. And that night, they were having the red carpet premiere of Jay Kelly, which I would argue is the most glitz and glamour Hollywood celebrating Hollywood event of the night. So I decided I was going to cancel my other tickets and hop in the standby line and see if I could get in. And then I started tweeting a bunch, and it was a real kind of up and down experience where even though I was the first one in the standby line, the event was so full that they weren't sure if they were going to let me in. But case in point, they did, and I got to experience Jay Kelly in the beautiful actual Chinese theater amongst industry titans industry workers, agents, managers, celebrities, God knows who else. And the president of the AFI introduced it as if he was a preacher in a megachurch telling the story of how our God and Savior, Noah Baumbach, resurrected the AFI festival when Marriage Story slotted in for a movie that bailed in its slot in 2019. And then we finally watched it. And I think that Jay Kelly is very solid. It is Noah Baumbach working in a much more soft, sensitive gear. If you're really used to his acidity, if that's what you love about him, you might find yourself disappointed. It certainly has somewhat of a cynical edge because it is about an aging movie star grappling with the fact that he's not going to be around forever and that he's largely alienated his two daughters in different ways. And because it's George Clooney, the movie is not shy, and I would in fact say is a bit too on the nose at times in making that direct parallel. But Noah co-wrote this with actress Emily Mortimer, and I think she brings out this much more sensitive, caring voice in the characters, and that especially is true of Adam Sandler, who plays Jay's manager. He is so endearing, so sweet, and ultimately kind of, for a while, a tragic character. And this is the most emotionally open and grounded, I think, that we've seen Sandler. Like in Uncut Gems and Punch Drunk Love, they're very big performances, big emotions, big breakdowns, just everything is at an 11. But here he's really folded into a dramatic ensemble in a way that we really haven't seen before, at least not at this level. It's more similar to his previous work with Baumbach in the Meyerowitz stories, but he does a tremendous job. I think that it's very likely that he'll get a supporting actor nomination, although the devil Sean Penn might beat him. And then you've got some great supporting work. Laura Dern, Patrick Wilson, Billy Crudup, just a laundry list of different character actors and beloved celebrities that kind of pop in for a scene or two. A really solid movie. I will say a bit episodic. It's pretty long. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And there was a certain point where I felt like I was watching a season of the studio that got hijacked and ran off to do its whole other thing and become a drama. It is a very inside baseball, but I think that if you do have a passion and an appreciation for movies and movie stars, you're going to really enjoy it. There's a scene where George Clooney is on a train and a bunch of people are adoring him, and he's on this train because he's following his daughter to Europe. And there are people telling him, I see my whole life in you, and you can't be getting old because that means I am. It's this very bittersweet, reverent approach to movie stardom. And I think that for some people, they're going to turn off to that. But if because I know there's just a lot of very like, I hate celebrities and I don't want to hear anything they have to say, and I don't care about any movies coming out, and like, if you're that kind of person, don't bother. But if it's something that sounds exciting to you, I think you'll probably really enjoy it.
I can't wait to check it out when it releases this December or whenever I get a chance to see it. Very jealous, to be honest, of that experience of yours. I don't know if I'm going to check out the other two you mentioned that day, but you know what? We'll keep them on the watch list. We'll see what happens. If I ever need my slow multiple prosecutor meetings, I'll let you know and we can check that one out. Moving on to Friday, day 3, I will go with what I saw quickly. The Love That Remains is the new film from the same director as Godland, following this family whose parents have just split up. But it's not necessarily like trauma between them or anger or like aggression. They're just kind of trying to navigate co-parenting while he goes for these extended times on a boat fishing to earn money, but he's still supporting the family and everything. Just beautiful Icelandic nature. They live on this plot of land. She works as an artist, and it's just like some of the most gorgeous nature visuals and editing I've ever seen. There's this wonderful sequence of them just like opening up mushrooms, and it's just like it's done poetically and beautifully. I really appreciated a lot of what this film was building as far as family, not even like drama, but just like this life of this perfect family in Iceland was so enjoyable to sit with. And then as it goes, it just gets more and more abstract and artistic in a way that I just don't think necessarily actually elevated itself. It starts to get random. It feels like for the sake of being random. And I would have rather them just cut that and been a shorter, more focused feature that was more grounded. Still enjoyable, still definitely worthwhile. But I don't know if it quite hit me as a revelation as I thought it was building to be. Also gets quite dark at the end, which again, like for a film that is so positive and warm and longing memories of a family and childhood, there's funny moments of darkness. For example, one of the brothers accidentally shoots the other brother with a bow and arrow, and it's amazing. It's so comedic, so funny. But then you get like some really really dark moments at the end where it's just like, I don't know. I was here for the fun family stuff. I also saw this day saw Charlie Kaufman's new short film, How to Shoot a Ghost, I believe it's called. Only 20 minutes really when you get past credits, about these two people in Athens who recently passed away, and now they're kind of just like wandering the city reflecting on life. And I'm not a huge Charlie Kaufman fan. I think one of the most iconic early moments of this podcast was the I'm Thinking of Anything's podcast, where I just hated that movie. I did not like that movie at all. I think these like 20 minutes, this is what Charlie Kaufman should always do. Just get in, have your style, get a little bit of substance, and leave without having to drag it out for an hour and a half. I thought this was very, very lyrical. Jesse Buckley is really good in this. Just the sense of longing that this creates as they just wander around. They look like normal people. They don't look like spooky ghosts at all. But they just want to reach out and touch someone they loved and console them as they're in their grief, and they can't. Really, really beautifully done. And then some beautiful thoughts on like the ghosts of a city, where you have Athens, where even like the stones that literally physically built the city have their own ghosts and carry that with them. And it's not something we necessarily experience as much in America, but especially with European cities that go back centuries and centuries, like how many ghosts occupy that city to where it's like almost a city of ghosts versus the city of the living. I thought these ideas were just very profound and moving. I really appreciated this for a short film. I was a little bit nervous about, because you just never know with Kaufman. um, I will also then introduce the next one we both saw, The Plague, taking place at a boys' water polo camp, where it is just hell. It is just bullying, bullying, bullying. A young boy is there, and he's starting to get in with this clique of really popular boys who just continually tear apart anyone who is different or anything, including this one boy who has some type of skin condition. So he has to wear like a shirt, and they've decided like, oh, he has the plague that is super contagious. If you touch him at all, you will get it and you will die from it. You will like quickly, rapidly like lose the ability to function, and you will die. And you get this take on bullying that I thought was effective. Like, you definitely watch this film and you're definitely like, oh, bullying is bad. For me, it just didn't really go beyond that. I didn't find this film to be overly entertaining or overly horrifying. There are some moments of self-harm that definitely have an impact, but for me, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I get bullying is bad, right? Like, that's not really a hot take or a new take or a nuanced perspective. It was just kind of there. And Joel Edgerton is just kind of there. He has like one talking scene that I use the bathroom during, so I can't really say too much about his performance, but probably underutilized, I would assume. But Michael, I know this was a film that touched you a lot more than it touched me, so please take it away.
To me, it felt, in this era of time, it takes place in 2003. There was a lot of anti-bullying PSAs and a lot of people trying to crack this whole phenomenon of bullying, unsuccessfully, I might add. As someone who faced this head on as a kid, this really got under my skin. It is one of those movies that treats very normal experiences as larger than life. For this kid, it is an impossible circumstance to deal with this one bully who is just perpetuating all these rumors about him and his friend. And I just found the way that this movie managed to ratchet up the tension with very mild stakes from a macro level to be so impressive. This director, Charlie Pollinger, to me is now completely on my radar, as well as the child actors in the movie, Everett Blanc, and especially Kyo Martin, who plays the main bully. This kid has such an intense, confident screen presence, and he really holds the screen in a way that I'm not used to from a child. I think we're going to be seeing him again when he's an adult, or maybe even before. And Joel Edgerton, I do think, brings a nice kind of world weariness to his role. He's not in it as much as I would have liked, but I think you do get the perspective of someone who's been around the block 100 times and has kind of seen this all before. But to this kid, he's just an old guy who doesn't understand. I thought it was riveting. And I think it's really going to resonate with you based on the experiences you may or may not have had as a child.
Yeah, I also wasn't like, not to be like, but like I wasn't bullied. So like, I don't know, maybe if I was bullied and this brought me right back to those moments, maybe it would have that hit. I will say this narrative, one of the biggest stories of the festival is like the child performances. Oftentimes far more impressive than the adult performances we were seeing between Rebuilding, this, Is This Thing On, which we'll get to in a minute, The Love That Remains, more films that we'll talk about, like the kid performances. It's just like, because I personally, for my awards, have a best youth performance category, and this year it's like just a bloodbath with how many good kid performances. But yes, there's like 3 really, really strong performances in this from kids. And that main bully is like a professional skateboarder, which I didn't know. Wild stuff. But he is like, you just want to, in the best of ways, like punt him in the face off the screen. So good. I cannot wait to see what he does next. But Michael, kind of the main event for you, we're kind of having dessert early. When tickets went on sale, when it was announced, there was no question. It was like, oh, we're all looking Friday night because Bradley Cooper's Is This Thing On is screening. For those who don't know, you are in love with Bradley Cooper. You love his previous films. This is your guy. This is your stan. So I was so excited when we actually got the tickets. That was the first worry, is like, what if it sells out immediately? No, we are good. We got them. And then I had some genuine anxiety. I told you this when we were sitting there. Like, I have anxiety for you because we're about to sit and watch Bradley Cooper 3. Like, will this deliver? So I need to know, Michael, did Bradley Cooper 3, BC3, did this deliver what you needed?
Definitely. And I was so pleased about that because as the lights went down, I went, my mental health for the next 3 years is going to all depend on this. The Maestro fallout, it was really rough for me. I was in the trenches defending Maestro. The tide is already starting to turn. I'm seeing a lot of you now going, Maestro is great. It was great the whole time. And when there's a criterion of Maestro and everyone's like, a bunch of stupid people hated it when it came out, I'm going to be like, yeah. So as for Is This Thing On, this is a much more scaled back, mellow film about a couple who has separated, Tess and Alex, played by Laura Dern and Will Arnett. And Alex decides to take up stand-up comedy sort of accidentally. He's high on a cookie and he finds himself lost in the city and just kind of wanders into a comedy club and starts venting, but he decides that it's actually a great therapeutic outing for him, so he keeps going. And what you discover as the movie unfolds is this could have easily been a film about a couple who is just at each other's throats and it's just really nasty, and they're one-upping each other at every turn, and this really isn't like that. It's about two people who are having deep issues, who mostly care about one another and want the other one to be okay. And it's a really refreshing dynamic. It almost sort of goes back to what I was saying about Rebuilding, where in this one, there definitely is more conflict and things do arise that, you don't want to spoil. But what really strikes me is just the warmth of this very unique dynamic that we don't really see portrayed this way all too often. And I think that Will Arnett and Laura Dern are both excellent in the movie. I also must mention that Bradley Cooper appears in the film as Balls. Yes, that is his name. He is Alex's best friend, and he provides some magnificent comedic relief. If you loved him in his roles in The Hangover, or even just his early comedy era, the like he's just not that into you kind of vibe, and the several others, Wet Hot American Summer, that era of Bradley, you're going to be so happy with what he does here. He slaps every punchline out of the park. Just great stuff. And I think it's going to be a real palate cleanser for people who are a little sick of him and how he presents himself because Balls is a struggling actor. So he kind of pokes fun at his persona without it being too in your face. And he has very testy chemistry with his wife, played by Andra Day, also very well. And that coupling of two people who are staying together but maybe shouldn't nicely contrasts Alex and Tess. I think on the first viewing, I found it to be so warm that when it starts to turn into, okay, let's get to the root of these problems these two are having, I had a hard time buying into the fact that these two couldn't have figured it out over the course of a 20-year marriage. And it just, I don't know if I think I just wanted a bit more tension, whether it be friction, whether it just be extenuating circumstances bringing these problems out. During the Q&A, they actually brought up a scene that was cut from the movie where one of their kids' arms gets broken and they kind of fight because of that. I think that should have been back in. It just needed something else to show us instead of tell us what is wrong with these two, because I very quickly was rooting for them and didn't really understand why they were broken up at all. But beyond that, I think it is a lot of fun. It's probably my least favorite of Bradley's movies at this point in time. I definitely reserve the right to raise my rating and change my answer when I start rewatching it. But I am getting the impression that for many, it's their favorite of his three. It Virtually anyone we spoke to briefly about it absolutely loved it. It seems like it's going to hit harder with kind of the 40s, 50s, 60s Academy members and industry people. And I think it's a great reset for Bradley's run as a director. I enjoyed it a lot.
I must say, out of every film we saw at the festival, that people saw, rather, at every screening after this one, people were in the crowd. You could hear them talking about how much they loved Is This Thing On. The passion is there. So you definitely won with this. I agree. Obviously, I'm not as in love with Bradley as you are, just that you're the Stan here. But I also think he's 3 for 3 as a director. I really love A Star Is Born. I really, really enjoyed Maestro more than most. And I love Is This Thing On, the crowd-pleasing movie of the fall. This is the one, easily the film this year, where it's like, I can recommend this to everyone. I would tell my friends to see this, my parents to see this, my other family to see this. Like, everyone I think would go to this and have a great time. Just a normal movie, which you really have championed the fact that we need more normal movies that are not trying to be these elevated works that capture human emotions, that are just classic movies. And this does that so well. I thought the emotions here translated wonderfully, super entertaining. What a performance by Will Arnett, though, I must say. Obviously the real ones like us know him from BoJack and know his range, but even then, translating that to a live action space, I think he's like a revelation here. I think he is really giving probably one of the best performances of the year. Laura Dern is strong. It also does, for me, a little bit feel like, oh, it's just kind of Laura Dern doing Laura Dern, though. Like, of course she's great, of course she's the best ever. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say challenging herself with this role, but I think Will really is the standout here. But yeah, I mean, super entertaining, super crowd pleasing. Again, like, it's just one of those movies where afterwards you're in a great mood, you feel fully satisfied. Really a classic production in a way that, like, again, I think I agree with you, Hollywood needs more of these. In some ways a very different project than this, to be clear, but like the Holdovers of this year, where it's like, I can't wait to go rewatch this. It just gives me this warm feeling. I can't wait to get either the screener link, or especially when it comes out in theaters, hopefully there are crowds, because I think it's great with a crowd. I really enjoyed this. I can't wait for more to see it when it comes out in December. Like, I think this is easily, in my opinion, one of the best films of the year. So I am happy we got to experience this one together. Do you have anything before we move on, just because it's your film? Anything left you want to get into with Is This Thing On?
Just that I think that a lot of people are going to talk about how much more reserved Bradley's direction is, but he does innovate within this more mellow context. I really loved that he apparently operated the camera for most of the movie, and when these tenser conversations or these stand-up sets are going on, he kind of gets in the middle of it like a gossipy onlooker. And I thought that that was a really cool and unique approach to a drama like this. That, or dramedy. That's pretty much all I've got, though. I mean, I'm sure that we'll probably talk about it again when it gets closer, but Beast,
100%.
that's what I've got to live for now.
Yes, and then Bradley Cooper 4. The countdown is on. When one era ends, the next begins. See you next era. Now let's go to Saturday, our penultimate day of the festival. I will start with what I saw that you did not. I would just say Christie is a nightmare. Lifetime ass performances here. One of the most boring films I've ever sat through. It's not even just like, it's, oh my God, it's a boring standard sports biopic, but like, it's such a poorly done one. I think Sydney Sweeney's fine. I think she's like genuinely really trying here, but it's just impossible to judge a great performer when she's in the middle of like an elementary school production of a play, right? Like it's gonna not shine as bright as maybe it should on a more elevated stage. Also, you did not make the trek at 10:30. Fake fan, fake critic. You did not show up to the 10:30 Elephant documentary by Werner Herzog, Ghost Elephants, which turned out, this was one that, again, speaking of documentaries, I was nervous about. I'm not necessarily the biggest Herzog girly, and I was like, oh my God, what if it's just slow elephant documentary for like 2 hours at 10 a.m.? I might just kill myself in this Chinese theater. And it was not. Such a good film. Oh my God, I think this was Herzog's probably best film since Grizzly Man, which is one of my all-time favorite films. Not just looking at these elephants, and there's very briefly, brief shots even of elephants. He even went up beforehand when introducing the film, and he was like, hey, I don't really know why National Geographic wanted this movie. Like, just know it's not a nature documentary. Like, it says elephants. The ghost is the bigger portion there, not the elephant portion. But really a film not only about colonization and about saving wildlife and the politics of Africa and the politics of like keeping specimens of nature and genetic testing of nature. It has a lot it's talking about, but also really you center in on the main guy, who is the guy who for a decade has been working in Africa trying to find these elephants that people don't even know if they exist. That's why they're called ghost elephants. Is it's like we think they're here. There's evidence of them here, but no one's ever seen them, and it might be a new subspecies of elephant. And Herzog really deep dives with this guy of like, this is your dream in life. Your dream is to find these elephants. Are you sure you like want to find them? Is it better to achieve your dream and then have to wake up the next day and realize like, oh, that's done? Or is it better to always be chasing these elephants, always be chasing that dream? And really getting into his mindset there and really questioning just in general, like, what is the human experience if it's not chasing our dreams? And what should the end goal be? Should the end goal be achievement of those dreams, or should it be the longing for the dream? Which is an incredibly poignant thought. Again, it's very similar to Grizzly Man. We are focusing on this guy who's interacting with nature, obviously very less tragic in this sense, but you're really getting into the mindset of that guy and finding something that really I thought was quite beautiful and moving, and it's excellently put together. It will be out on Disney Plus in March, Herzog revealed, so highly recommend others check it out in the theater ideally. But really 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 well made. Like clearly Herzog has a budget, clearly Herzog has a vision. Fascinating to hear that this originally was not even a Herzog feature, and then the filmmakers reached out to him and were like, hey, we are starting to film this. We have no idea what we're doing. We have no idea what we're capturing. We have no idea what the story is. And then Herzog went and was like, yeah, it's a great story. I have to do it myself, actually. And just elevates the film tremendously. Absolutely one of my favorites of the festival, which I didn't necessarily expect from Ghost Elephants. It kind of almost became a meme almost. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for our Ghost episode or Ghost Elephants episode. But we really could have done one, but you took the valid option and didn't wake up at 10 a.m. for that. So I actually do appreciate that. But we did see quite a few films together this day. Do you want to go ahead and introduce a couple?
Yeah, so we'll start with Dead Man's Wire, which is the latest from Gus Van Sant, who directed Good Will Hunting and Milk and Elephant. And it's about Tony, set in 1977. Tony's played by Bill Sarsgaard. He is a former real estate developer who was screwed out of a bunch of money by these shady mortgage bankers, and he decides to embark on something of a Dog Day Afternoon style hostage mission, kidnapping the son of the guy who runs the company, played by Dacker Montgomery. His father is played by Al Pacino, who is in the movie for all too short of a time, doing a foghorn leghorn style voice and just kind of chewing up scenery, which is really kind of the theme of this movie, which the direction is pretty electric. Like I mentioned, Gus Van Sant kind of brings this visceral, fast-paced Sidney Lumet style to it. It's very frantic, it's very chaotic, and it's immersive to a certain degree. Unfortunately, I continue to just not be impressed with Bill Skarsgård, and I think that whenever he's not caked in makeup playing some crazy monster, he just goes into overacting anyway. And this is a great example. I know that he's trying to make Tony seem very unhinged, unpredictable, but he's never scary. He's just kind of mugging and screaming. It reminded me of a lot of Johnny Depp's worst work. I know you had even said Jim Carrey, which I think is a pretty good comparison as well. And it just kind of deflates the tension of this whole situation because it just sort of turns into a cartoon despite the level of atmosphere. Really, the only person who blends into the setting well is Coleman Domingo as a radio host who gets rolled into this whole thing. But that's just because Coleman Domingo might as well have time traveled from the 70s to now. He just so embodies that energy. It's not terrible. It's certainly watchable. And I think that if you buy into the Bill Skarsgård performance, you'll have a way better time. But for me, it was just pretty rancid. Not the best.
I don't know. With age, this one's just growing to be terrible in my mind. Like, Jesus. Coleman Domingo's great. This is kind of his gimmick almost so now, is he's just like a great part of bad movies. As you say, this is going to live and die for you on the Bill Skarsgård performance. I would recommend watching the trailer. If you're vibing with that, if you think that's so entertaining and you love it, go watch the movie. If you think it's grating and annoying and irritating how I did, cut the movie from your schedule. Not worth it. A complete mess production-wise. It cannot understand what it's trying to be. Not only just emotionally, where you have this really comedic performance with this character who the film clearly wants you to laugh at, but then also tries to make you understand and see a more poignant value in his life, while also at the same time rejecting him because of this crime, which is like a pretty horrible, traumatic crime. It doesn't know what it wants to say with that, but also just the style here. It keeps having these random moments of diegetic like music and documentary footage or news footage, but then like that's really uneven with how it's used and how it's designed. It just feels like the film is like spinning a wheel at times, just like, what random thing should I do now? It did not come together, and again, I just fucking hated this performance. I think all the performances are bad outside of Coleman Domingo, to be clear. I don't think anyone in this film that comes out unscathed, outside of Coleman, but like that lead performance by Bill just fucking irritated me. So sad. This was again my only red carpet premiere. So how exciting to be in the Chinese theater, how exciting to be, with the stars and with the crew, and just to have that energy. This is when I could not leave quick enough. There was a debate where like we had to make it to our next screening, and we were like, well, should we stay for the Q&A? Like, what should we do? And I was so happy you texted that you were leaving, because I was like, I could not sit there and just deal with this guy for more. And I love Gus Van Sant. I think he's a great director. I think he's made so many incredible works. Elephant, Good Will Hunting, those are two of my all-time favorites. But this was just a fucking disaster. I thought I really like, with time, I'm just growing like visceral in my hate for it. So sad. But alas,
I kind of wish we had stayed for the Q&A though, considering what we saw next.
well, you can get into it.
No, you. Why don't you go? Why don't you start on Peter Hujar?
Okay, fair enough. So to be clear, yeah, so we had to change in schedule once we got the tickets for the red carpet. And I was like, Michael, come to Peter Hujar, the same guy who made Passages and a lot of other queer cinema, bringing to life a conversation between Peter Hujar and, oh my God, what's the woman's name in this? Hold, please.
Linda Rosencrantz.
Yes, bringing to life a conversation between photographer Peter Hujar and Linda Rosencrantz in 1974, New York City. This was originally, Rosencrantz was going to do this book where she was going to talk to a bunch of these famous artists about what they did in a day in like extreme detail, and then was going to publish this to find a poignancy in like, how does life pass? And Peter Hujar was the one she did. Ended up not creating the project, but the transcript for this was found, and I guess they were like, we gotta film it. Definitely a taxing feature. at points, because it is just for an hour-ish, over an hour, just this conversation between these two people in this apartment. The film tries its best to spice it up. It tries to throw in some good editing, tries to change the mood, tries to change cinematography, but undoubtedly a very dry project. And your enjoyment from this is going to come from your enjoyment of the culture of the time, of your knowledge of the culture at the time. For me, I really enjoyed this film, to be honest. Yes, in a film festival, a wild choice, and it's not like a real film. I really could not recommend this to anyone, to be honest. But I love talking about William Burroughs, and I love them talking about Susan Sontag. That meme of the guy sitting up in the chair, when they mentioned Sontag, I was like activated, like, whoa, what's happening? And I do think there is a poignancy found in just this idea of like, if this guy who feels like he does nothing every day shares every detail throughout the day, you end up getting this wild story that ranges for over an hour. And like, we often feel like we're wasting our lives, wasting days. At least I do a lot. So having that reminder of like, no, that is life, and life is still happening in those moments and with those emotions, I think is quite lovely. But I definitely see why someone would hate this film. And Michael, I think that's where you come into the conversation.
Oh, Peter Hujar. So listen, I'm stupid. I don't know anything about this time period, or like this community in this time period. I'm a plebe, okay? I didn't come in with my encyclopedic knowledge of this specific street corner of New York City at this specific moment in time, okay? So I was sitting there, and the best way that I could describe it, I have heard people say that when me and my friends talk about movies, and it's just this nonstop barrage of like this movie and this director and this actor and like connecting all these different projects and things, that it just sounds like white noise to them, and that they're just like, how do I even jump in? How do I even participate? This is not for me at all. I got to experience that with Peter Hujar's Day. I could not tell you a single solitary thing they were talking about. And the way that, because it is a candid conversation, if you don't come into it with an encyclopedic knowledge of that, you're just sitting there as this man rambles on and on. And then I went to this club and took this picture of this guy, and he seemed a little upset. So I went to the next club and I got drunk with so and so. And then I came home and I felt sad. But then the next day went over here and I met this person and I took these pictures. And it's just like, holy fuck, shut up. It was a nightmare. I literally, even though this was only 76 minutes, it felt like some of my longest time spent in a theater. It was actual hell. Ben Whishaw and Rebecca Hall are as good as you can be. I'm sure that they bring Peter Hujar and Linda Rosenkrantz to life in beautiful, vivid fashion if you know who the hell they are. For me, I couldn't care less. This movie does nothing to make me care. Put it on what is it? Put it on Canopy so that people can. I was about to say put it on Canva. That's
Well, they're the lead. They're so important to the filmmaking process.
Put it on Canva. Put it on Canopy.
The first Canva original, Peter Hujar's Day,
so that people can look. Oh, I'm doing research on this period. Look at all these things that I know, and they're talking about it. But if you're Joe Average, I believe that I represent something of like the regular person in the world. You're going to be completely lost and alienated. One of the worst of the festival. I'd say second worst behind Continental 25.
First off, I think Ben Whishaw is genuinely one of the best performances of the year. He will be in my best actor lineup. Second, if you've not read Susan Sontag, go check out On Photography, one of the best books ever written and one of the best artists ever who lived this planet. I enjoyed it. Again, though, like, this is one where I would never debate if someone hated it. Very valid. It is definitely taxing, definitely inside baseball. But in a way, I think if you, again, like these people or know these people, you will enjoy it well enough. What a twist, though. What a turn. Because our next film, one of the more anticipated films of the festival, one I think we both knew was just going to be like a really visceral experience, The Voice of Hind Rajab. This is the true story of a young girl who in Palestine was trapped in a car with her family. They were killed and she was stuck in this car for hours and hours and hours as rescuers tried desperately to find a path to get to her. This really goes in depth with like the process where it's like, no, to get into this area, we have to have an approved route. So the Israel forces will not shoot the ambulance and kill everyone inside. But once you get an approved route, then you have to get the green light, which says that everyone on the ground like knows what is happening and knows that this car is going to come through. So it's a process that takes hours, and they just have to sit there on the phone with her. And the film makes the choice. This is the same director who did Four Daughters, who did The Man Who Sold His Skin, and especially with Four Daughters, she started to transcend this line between fiction and reality of using real elements in these narrative features. And it uses the real phone calls. So there's no child actor in this on the line. This is the real phone calls with the real girl. The film breaks down all like lines between that and just puts you in the reality of the situation. So you, alongside these actors playing the Red Cross individuals, not the Red Cross, it is like, I forget the official name, but it's like the Palestine aid force that deals, it's like basically 911 for Palestine to deal with, especially what is happening because of this conflict.
The Red
Um,
Crescent.
the Red Crescent, yes. You have to sit there with them on the line and hear this young girl go through terror and go through hell as she has to deal with the death of her family around her. She's stuck in this car with their corpses. You have to hear her as she fears for her life as they shoot the car. As night falls, she starts to conceptualize her own death and conceptualize her pain and suffering, begging for help, begging for someone to be sent in to help her. And at the same time, the Red Crescent is sitting there and everyone is reacting to this differently, where some are saying, just send them in. We are 7 minutes away. It's an 8-minute drive for this ambulance, or a 40-minute walk even. Someone can go in and get her. But then you get this conversation of like, no, but we can't do that. We can't risk more frontline workers dying because we have no one there. We have one team literally left to do this. It is heartbreaking, but not only is it important, not only do I think the emotions just naturally, I mean, what a layup. Obviously, this is going to be a tearjerker. Obviously, this is going to give you a really strong emotional reaction. But I think this director is just perfect. Again, you found this evolution between Four Daughters to this. And with this project, as it continually breaks down that wall, continually reminds you this is real. I think it does it in really strong ways, really clever ways, really thoughtful ways. There's a scene where they start filming the phone call for social media because they're trying to get social media buzz to get the process to move faster. And on the iPhone being shown is the real people. And you can see like as it moves exactly with the real video. I think stuff like that was really clever and really effective, and I think was really purposeful. I don't think this story could have been told in any other way. And again, I don't think it could have been told with any other director. I do think this is absolutely one of the best films of the year, but absolutely one of the heaviest ones. So I'll never forget sitting in the theater and very early on with one of the first phone calls, they're talking to another adult in the car and you hear gunfire and you hear her just scream in pain and then the line drops and it's the real audio you're hearing. And it just, you can conceptualize and discuss death and this violence all you want, but to have an artifact like that and to hear that real suffering, that real death, to hear a woman really die in that moment. I would never want to rewatch the film, but that is an experience that is so powerful and so venomous. And it just feels like I think everyone needs to go through a film like this or understand this in some way, because it's not just statistics. It's not just these stories on social media. It is real. And it hit me in a really, really, profound way that just, I mean, out of every film we saw, this was the one where the screening, no one made a sound. It was just silence as everyone just sat with us until everyone started crying. So really, really powerful stuff. I know that you were not a biggest fan of this, considering you thought it was worse than Roofman, but please take it away.
Oh man, Carson and I got into it afterwards because there we had a bridge between this and the next movie that was so insane that I wrote a whole editorial about it, but we'll get to that. So I thought this was great. The movie that it really reminded me of the most was Paul Greengrass's United 93, mostly because in that movie, a lot of the air traffic controllers and the various kind of administrative people are all played by the same people who were there on the day. And I think that this depicts and unfolds a crisis in a very similar way. And it also gets into the office politics of it all in a way that feels extremely disarming and in the best possible way. Um, it is really hard to reckon with. It is really hard to sit through these moments, like you mentioned, where all of these things that we hear about and are insulated from become real. But I think that the film is also very tasteful in the sense that because it's all real audio, it doesn't sensationalize the actual violence. You never go to the car, you never see it except for real life footage at the end. I think of in a more conventional scenario, like even United 93, you would have a sort of intense thriller part of the movie where you'd be inside the car and Hind would be talking on the phone and you'd see the soldiers surrounding her and it would be very kind of sensationalized action thriller energy with a tragic ending. And this is entirely committed to just representing reality. And I think in that aspect, it succeeds tremendously.
Yes, and I say the Roof Man, of course, out of jest. You have a ranking that includes entertainment value and stuff, like very valid. I genuinely do not care what you put it at. It was just very funny. I think that was one of the funniest moments. Still dealing with like trauma. I guess we were processing trauma and then having that conversation. And if you want to hear that full conversation, check out the editorial. Fantastic editorial from Michael, going through that experience, because we had literally 30 minutes from the time this film ended to when our next film, Bad Apples, began, which is a very, after this, just seeing any movie next is wild. But then going to this dark comedy about this teacher played by Saoirse Ronan, who in an altercation kind of purposefully, but she doesn't intend to necessarily, kidnap one of her students, and she's going to take him to the hospital. And then he's like, I'll tell everyone that you hit me and you hurt me and you attacked me. So she's like, well, fuck, I don't know what to do. I guess you can go stay in my basement for a few days. And then the situation spirals out of control. A very, very wild turnaround of emotions. For me with Bad Apples, I think Saoirse Ronan is really strong here. And again, good kid performances, another example of that. In its best moments, this film is untouchable. There are some moments where it really commits to the bit. It goes full force, and those are hysterical. I mean, it's impossible not to laugh. I wish those were just more consistently in the film, though. This is this guy's, I don't believe it's his directorial debut. I think it's his sophomore feature, but still, either way, early on into his career. And I think you feel that. I think there is a lack of confidence sometimes within this film of going too dark or being too fucked up. But like, exactly, that's what it should be. It should fully just be, in my opinion, this fucked up comedy that's taking the piss out of itself. And when it does that, it's the film's best moments. The parent-teacher meeting in this is one of the best scenes of the year, probably. It's so funny. It just, there's so much else that is just kind of drags, and there's a lot here that just never really gets paid off. Like, for example, when she kidnaps this kid, she starts to, and it just spirals on to be a month of it. She starts to teach him English. She starts to teach him more because she's a teacher, and she realizes that he doesn't know basic like writing and basic skills. So she begins to teach him that, and they form this kind of like sweet bond, which is obviously contextualized in this really fucked up situation where she's not obviously in the right at all, and the film doesn't try to project that. But you start to think like, oh, maybe this is going to be a layer, because we are showing this. It's going to be a layer of complexity near the end, where like this kid is going to have to rationalize like, well, my old life kind of sucked. This life is kind of great. Like, just something to go with that, and it just then disappears. There's a lot of elements like that where it just feels like it's building something or building an emotion or building an idea that never really goes anywhere. And then if you want to say, well, it's just supposed to be entertaining, sure, I agree with you there, but I think it was more moderately entertaining than resoundingly entertaining. Compared to Is This Thing On, I was never hysterically laughing throughout like I was with that film. So I don't know, it didn't do a lot for me. What were your thoughts on Bad Apples?
Despite the transition, I had an absolute blast with this. And even though I think it's pretty evil, because ultimately the message of the movie is just maybe this new generation of like young violent little boys just need to be lightly disappeared so that the herd can thrive, so that we as a whole can move on and prosper, which is very dark. But I think that the movie executes it really well because in the first act there isn't really a lot of comedy. It's more of a uncomfortable pseudo thriller because this boy is just so violent. He's throwing kids down the stairs. He's screaming and howling at his teacher. He's like breaking things every chance he gets. So there's like this sinful kind of satisfaction when Saoirse Ronan tries to take back some control. But ultimately, the way that she does it is terrible, and you just have to laugh because immediately the entire situation is completely out of her control. And she's brilliant in it. And I think that performance is really what carried me through, even when certain elements of the movie maybe lacked here and there. I think ultimately I was just so drawn in by that performance and the kind of Stockholm syndrome dynamic that you mentioned that ultimately it was just a blast for me. And the third act is fantastic. If I had any little quibble, it's that Jacob Anderson from Interview with the Vampires in this, all too briefly, as a teacher who had a brief affair with Saoirse Ronan. And I think he's just not in the movie enough. His character kind of almost meaningfully figures in, but just never quite gets there. But beyond that, I think it's an absolute blast. And I think that if you're a parent or a teacher, you might entirely reject it and turn it off. But if it's your kind of sick, you're going to really vibe with it.
As someone who works in education, those first 20 minutes, and the film does not continue this way. So any teachers, feel safe to go to the theater. But genuinely, if it was not a film festival and I was not with someone, like I would have left the theater. It was so miserable to be in just because it so accurately shows you like the worst moment of your job. And you're like, wow, this is hell to be in. I want to leave this environment immediately. And then it gets crazy and fun. So like, don't worry about that. But as an educator, definitely rough first 20 minutes, let's say. And just like that, Michael, we're at our final day. It's Sunday. That's how a film festival goes. You get in the conversation, you get, wow, all these films, and then all of a sudden it's almost over. Let's quickly go through what we watched individually, and then we can talk about what we saw together. I have two films to talk about. First up, Happy Birthday. This is Egypt's best international submission this year about a young girl. So Egypt has this class system where there is obviously a lower class and a higher class. This young girl belongs to the lower class, and she's 8 years old. She's been hired as a maid to this family who treats her pretty well. I mean, it is like still fucked up that they have a child maid for sure, but they treat her pretty well, and she just like falls in love with them. She falls in love with this life, this escape from the position she's in society. And their daughter's having a birthday party, and she's like, oh my God, I'm so excited to come. Please, can I come? And they're like, we don't really want you here. You're like a maid. You're like lower class. Like people would judge us. So they try to excuse her, but she still finds a way to get to the party. And she then has to kind of deal with like, oh, this family who I love so much, who I want to be their daughter. I want to exist in this world, rejects me ultimately. It's heartbreaking. It is so sad. Another great child performance. We're repeating that again. This year, I think if you are following film and you are someone who's voting in awards especially, but really trying to talk about the best films of the year, if you are not looking at the international features this year, I think you're just doing a disservice to yourself. There's been really, really good, don't get me wrong, American productions and English productions. But so many of the best films of the year come from these international pool this year, and this is absolutely one of them. Really love that. And then I also saw Endless Cookie. This was one of the midnight films, an animated film about these two brothers who it's like meta in the sense of it's really these brothers who really get a grant to make this animated film, and they just kind of go about like talking, telling stories, some true, some fictional, with the hope of like, well, if we make it visually interesting enough, this might be profound in some way. I think the best example, I don't know if you ever listened to this or watched this, but Netflix released a series called The Midnight Gospel from Duncan Trussell, which adapted episodes of his podcast into these really wild, animated, vibrant stories. And I think there's a lot of power and poignancy to that show. I really enjoy it. I guess you maybe are not a big fan, but that's okay.
That's all you had to say to make sure I never touch this.
Oh, sure. It's like that, but like way more boring. Again, there are moments like one of the brothers is Indigenous, so you get a lot of good conversation about Canada and their treatment of Indigenous people. But it's just like so drawn out, and I just found it to be so boring. I don't know if it was just festivals, or I don't know if it was somewhat festival fatigue, but I found it really difficult to stay locked in on this. It really lost me at points to where it's like, yes, even the best moments, I don't know if they're resoundingly incredible enough to where I would rush to the theater, recommend anyone rush to the theater. Though if it was like just randomly streaming on like Adult Swim, like, I don't know, I think there's probably worse things you could watch at the same time, but really was not a fan. Michael, you're going to jump a little bit ahead in your day because your last film of the festival, I was not there for. I had to peace out. I had to get to work the next day. So you were brave. You went to the late showing of Testament of Ann Lee. I would love to hear how that went.
I wish I hadn't. but I guess I got it over with. This is directed by Mona Fastvold, who is married to Brady Corvée, who directed The Brutalist, which is a movie that at the time, I would say was very generous to because of its high production value, but ultimately find it very ponderous. And for a 4 hour movie, not saying a whole hell of a lot beyond its base imagery about the American dream. Well, here we go again. The reign of terror continues, and after a pre-movie Q&A where I had to sit there for 30 minutes while these people were yapping on about we can't spoil it, but it was really hard. We can't spoil it, but the choreography was really involved. We can't spoil it, but we got real pigs and sheep for this and blah blah blah. It just went on and on. Finally it starts and it deals with Ann Lee, who becomes the leader of the Shaker movement, which is a Christian subsect. She loses four children in their infancy, fathered by a rather evil man played by Christopher Abbott. Real stretch there. Christopher Abbott playing a jerk. And so it deals with the Shaker cult going from England to America and spreading out their congregation. It's told both in conventional narrative and as a musical. And you are subjected to what I can only describe as Annette style repetitive songs. There is a part where Ann Lee is in prison and she spends 3 straight minutes going, I hunger and I thirst. 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 I think she's hungry and thirsty. I think I get the point, okay? It's just ponderous and it has the same level of isn't this so important that the brutalist has? I suppose this is a family affair, and I suppose that I should separate Mona from Brady in some aspect, but to me, because they co-write their movies together and they share such a similar style, they are deeply intertwined. Amanda Seyfried as Anne is very good. She totally goes for broke. This is a very unglamorous role. There's a lot of moments where she has to contort her body or be shown in these very gritty situations involving childbirth. And there's some interesting theming in the beginning about how the Shaker cult is ultimately centered around abstinence. And I think you can interpret her character as creating this philosophy so that her husband will leave her alone and she doesn't have to have any more babies. That part of it is fascinating. But then once you get to America and it turns into the Lewis Pullman has to talk to a bunch of randos and God knows where, it just becomes a nightmare. Lewis Pullman plays her brother. We need to be done with him. I don't know what the upset there are just these random guys, Bill Sarsgaard, Lewis Pullman, Nepo babies, okay? They're not all Nepo babies, but some of them are, where suddenly they're in 15 movies and bad in all of them. And Lewis Pullman, he is a charisma vacuum and he has a lot to do in this movie. I think that it embodies just a lot of my least favorite qualities about this prestige era of filmmaking we're living in, where it tackles a big theme and it just is all style and there's no substance beyond just the very, very base situations that the characters have to go through. It was a really, at least it wasn't almost 4 hours long. So I can give Mona a bit of credit for having a bit more restraint than her husband. But ultimately, I just think that the Corbet family continues to be not for me, and maybe I'll just skip the next one.
You're very kind. You're being kinder than you should. I was shocked sitting there on my way home, and you're texting during this Q&A that happens beforehand, and literally like it feels like 30 minutes pass and it's still going. I was like, how is this movie not started? I kept being like, oh, Michael's gone because they started, and then you would keep going. I was like, how? I have no idea if I like the film. I don't assume so based off of your thoughts. But certainly one where like I'm kind of okay that I missed it at the festival. I'm kind of okay actually with how life turned out. Let's get to the two films we did see together that day, starting with Netflix's Train Dreams, a film I was so excited to see in the theater because considering it is Netflix, you never know if you're actually going to see these on the big screen. A longing look at this guy who works as a lumberjack, puts together a family. I guess I won't spoil too much about the film, but it's really about him understanding his place in an evolving society. He feels like his life is passing him by. He deals with some extreme tragedy, and he has to kind of feel just connected to life in a way that's like, I would say this is a far better Life of Chuck than Life of Chuck actually is. You actually see this guy goes through these trials and tribulations, and then at the end of that tunnel, find some peace and find some of that connection and find that emotion. Joel Edgerton is fantastic in this. I definitely would say the first half for me is stronger than the second half when it's really building this strong family drama and it's building the strong portrait of a guy, some really entertaining supporting actors here and some moving ones also. I was really in love with what this film was providing. The second half, it does begin to feel like it drags its feet a bit and it doesn't necessarily feel that gripping to me. But I did overall enjoy it. I definitely would recommend this. It's obviously Netflix's, likely going to be Netflix's kind of big contender this year. So I'm happy we got the chance to see it. I know this one hit you deeper than it hit me.
Definitely. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that I was expecting a Brady Corbet esque. This is the tale of America, and it's very ponderous and very self important and just monotonous. And it actually turned out to be both very economical, it's under 2 hours long, unpretentious to a stunning degree, very, at least in the first half, warm, darkly funny in the sense that the lumberjack or the logger work is very treacherous, and there's some kind of black humor that comes from that. And you've also got this really beautiful, tender, loving marriage at the center of it. And in a lot of these movies, much, and the brutalist comes to mind, especially since we're talking about Felicity Jones, you get the sense that it's just this is the man and the woman who are in the movie, and therefore they are in love. But you really see these two embrace each other physically and emotionally throughout the movie, and it's a delight, and you actually care about what's going to happen to them. What a concept. It's directed by Clint Bentley, and it is co-written by Greg Quidar, and the two of them actually worked together on Sing Sing last year, but Quidar directed that, and on this project they swapped who was the director. But I think you can definitely grasp at a similar sense of just radical empathy mixed with entertainment value. I think this might be just the best overall movie I saw at the festival. I think that I don't know if it's going to be a major awards player because I think that a lot of people are going to look at it as kind of a chore and maybe not watch it just because of what I was saying earlier, what you might expect. But I also think that for the people who do see it, this is going to be a movie that sticks with you and that you'll want to talk about and tell people about. And it does really just radiate the energy of a great American classic. I quite loved it. Yeah.
Super crowd pleasing. I mean, the final scene in this, like, it's very hard not to get that swell of emotion, like, applaud it. Like, it really does stick the landing in those final few minutes again, in the way that, like, it's pretty undeniable. I think if people sit down to watch this, especially in a theater, I think it's hard to walk away anything but positive. So I think it's going to play well, and I'm excited to see people see it. But enough of this child's play. I'm so excited. The final film I got to see in person at this festival, shockingly, my favorite film of the year, not only of the festival, but of the year entirely. Kristen Stewart's The Chronology of Water is a film I did not expect a lot from. I was excited to see what she had in her as a director, but this is adapting a memoir from this woman who is abused as a child, sexually abused as a child by her father, which is just hauntingly portrayed on screen by Stewart. And it's really about her life and how that event, that trauma, influenced and affected and pushed her throughout her life in many profound ways. In a way where I think if you hear that concept and you hear that premise, a lot of probably the content within the chronology of water is to be somewhat expected. It's not necessarily making huge swings there, but the presentation here as truly like a kaleidoscope of memories, where you have Kristen Stewart just getting completely, in the best of ways, immersed in this edit, immersed in this character, immersed in her memories and these textual things. There's so much texture to this film, from the swimming, from the water, to bodily fluids, to human touch. It's haunting. It's one of the most real and complex portraits of trauma that I've ever seen on screen, in a way that was very, very personal for me. I think a lot of people who come from any form of trauma will see a lot of themselves within the film. Um, the confidence of her as a director on her directorial debut is just stunning to watch. I mean, it's truly unbelievable at times how many swings she takes with this film, stylistically and in voice, and how she lands each one of them so precisely. Truly, I was blown away by this. I mean, I think it's fucking unbelievable. I think it's easily the best film of the year so far. I would be shocked if it got displaced for me from that list. Really such a high note to end the festival on, and I know it's one that I believe you enjoyed also quite a bit.
Yeah, it's neck and neck with Train Dreams for Best of the Fest. Train Dreams is kind of edging it out for now just based on enjoyment, but this is really a monumental work from Kristen Stewart. And I was just astonished at, like you mentioned, the edit, because it really does unfold as almost a 2 hour montage. We're never placed in one moment for longer than a few minutes. Sometimes we're just seeing disparate images, sometimes we're just hearing sounds. It's just, but it never becomes so esoteric that it pulls you right out. It just holds your attention with just how mortifying it is, how unsettling it is, and you're just waiting for the next kind of trial or tribulation this woman's going to go through next. But it also balances that out with how she moved past it, or not moved past it, maybe, but tried her best to overcome it via her writing and the different mentors that she had in that process. And I just want to say, Imogen Poots in this movie it's a decade best performance. And I think that it's going to be overlooked largely because I think this movie is going to be very slow to find its audience. It is challenging. It does take some patience. It's extremely distressing. I think that you're going to see a lot of people go see this because they're like, I want to see what Kristen Stewart does, and they're just like, they're completely thrown off the train. The best that I could say is, if within the first 10 minutes you're not like, oh, this movie is for me, I would just say don't watch the rest, because it is a style that is either going to totally work for you or totally not. But I think also that this is going to be a movie that in 20 years, people are going to look back as one of the best movies of this time. I think it just completely unfurls these issues in ways that I haven't seen. And and I'm sure she's pulling from different cinematic influences that I'm maybe not as aware of. And it's always tough for me because I'm doing my best to expand my knowledge of the world and history of cinema. But just because something feels like something I've never seen before doesn't mean that Kristen Stewart probably isn't knocking somebody off or doing something that has been done elsewhere. But in terms of recent cinema, especially American cinema, this is truly an original, and it is dense. And I ultimately left being like, before I watch this again, I need to read this book and I need to tether myself into this woman's life. And we should say her name. Her name is Lydia Yukonovich. Um, I need to tether myself in Lydia's life and have more of a guiding light in terms of just the linear events because it is so overwhelming that at a certain point at the beginning, I took notes throughout the movies of this festival mostly to keep myself coherent. And about 10 minutes into this, I had to just stop because I was just like, if I look down, if I disengage for even a moment to try to remember something, I'm going to fall off the train. Staggering. It's an incredible film, and
Yeah,
I really can't wait to see what Kristen Stewart does next. And if she is really going to dive all the way into this directing thing, I think she might surpass her acting career. Not that I think she's a terrific actress.
of course.
Some would disagree incorrectly,
Well,
but
I hope to see
but
everyone at the Twilight screenings this week. Come on.
yeah, no, exactly. But I just I think that she may be a filmmaker first.
No, I completely agree. I mean, the authorship here, the artistry here, it's poetic, it's wandering, it whispers to you. But it just comes together, as you mentioned, an experience that washes over you. It's not one where you're going to follow really clean narrative threads or you're going to follow really clean linear progression through stories. It is one that gets trapped on memories and lost in memories. And that lead performance, I'm so happy you mentioned, literally unbelievable. That pairing, especially, I mean, it seems so perfect for this project, but it feels also like they just bring something out of each other that I would love to be explored again. Stewart's definitely a filmmaker where I'm so excited to see what she does next. I think it's going to be a while before we see her again. Just I think clearly this had something within it that she needed to get out, and it will probably take time until she finds something like this again. Super fascinated to read the memoir, but like, yeah, just even talking about it now, it's almost hard to put into words how impressive I think this movie is. And I just think everyone, like, as long as, again, if you vibe with the style, if you don't vibe first 10 minutes, get out. And again, massive trigger warning, of course. It's horrifying, 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 horrifying in so many moments. But at the same time, there's such a human beauty here. Unbelievable. So absolutely a great note to end this festival and end our conversation, because just like that, Michael, that's everything we saw at AFI Fest. What an experience. How fun. I figured a good way to end this is just like, let's go through and share our top three of the festival. I can go first. We've already talked about them. So my top three, going from 3 to 1. Is this thing on? Bradley Cooper really does again. Super proud and super impressed with that film. All That's Left of You, incredible, just again stunning. And then the artistry of the Chronology of Water, for me, easily. It's not hyperbolic to say it's one of my favorite films of all time. So love it. Michael, what are your three favorites?
For now, Is This Thing On is number 4. I suspect that when I rewatch it, it might climb up a slot or 3 on my best of the year list. But for now, we're going to say that that's not in the top 3. Going from 3 to 1, Chronology of Water, and then at number 2, Rebuilding. That could change, but I think ultimately the more standard, I tend to just in general enjoy movies that have a more conventional standard style. I know that makes me a plebe, but um because of that, I think Rebuilding for now penetrated me a little bit deeper, but I think that Chronology of Water is kind of groundbreaking. You know what? Honestly, now that I'm looking at this list, Chronology of Water needs to go to number 2 over Rebuilding. Forget what I just said. Rebuilding, then Chronology of Water, and then at number 1, Train Dreams, because I just think that that is the most full-bodied, coherent, moving overall project that I think that not just film people are going to like, but like regular people as well. Like it would definitely be my top recommendation of the
Yeah.
festival, just to the average person. So that's what I'm gonna say for now.
Great. And I mean, it's so much great cinema. I don't think you can go wrong with most of the things we saw. So for this year, that's going to close our coverage here on the podcast of AFI Fest directly. Again, we will have episodes for certain titles from this list that we could dive in depth with. But those will come out over the next few months as films release. Michael, thank you so much for joining me, not just on this podcast tonight, but also at AFI Fest. So much fun. I hope next year, again, we'll see how the schedule works out, but I hope you can join me, because I really did genuinely have a blast hanging out and genuinely had a blast with this lineup. I think the lineup obviously helps quite a bit that we're watching good cinema often. Even like Peter Hujar, which one of the funniest moments of my life is as soon as that went down, like literally as soon as the first credit hit, looking over and Michael immediately is giving it 1 star on Letterboxd. Even that, I think we had some good laughs about. So shout out Junkie, film of the festival. With that said, Michael, where can we find you on social media?
We can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter/X. I write editorials for Merry Go Round magazine, and you'll see my new one about one of the weirdest moments of the festival at AFI coming sometime this week, I believe. Carson plays a supporting role in the story. We'll see how he takes to that, and we'll see. You know, I definitely think in the age where it feels like the social media landscape's going to be changing, we might be changing our output a little bit, but those are my platforms for now.
And of course, this podcast will, I believe, go out before that article releases. But if you listen to this after the fact, the article will be in the description below. You can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you so much again for listening and supporting us. You can find my full written works on stuff I saw at the festival, as well as Michael's on his Letterboxd and also on his TikTok. He made videos. So a lot of great stuff coming to you. And we'll be back with more episodes, more films, deep in award season, deep in this fall movie season. But it's going really good so far. So I'm kind of living for it. And with that, though, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.